Hey everyone, it's LS, your friendly neighborhood Korean fellatio enthusiast, here to bring you the semi. And they end up selecting the Braum. Fnatic very quick to respond with the Rakan. This can end up inducing either a Xayah pick or a ban in the second ban phase, and Fnatic also takes that Victor, so they're willing to handshake it against the Urgot. And we're having to see what Cloud9 have to answer for it. Lissandra locked in for Cloud9 against the LeBlanc to get that counter matchup in mid lane. Cloud9 now banning away the Xayah, as we just talked about, with the Rakan being picked. This isn't something that you'll see 100% of the time, but you do have to ask yourself the question if you want to be giving away Jakan to an opposing team. And then Jax banned away. When I was watching this live, I was really curious what that could mean. Apparently, some people were saying that Broxah had been spamming a lot of Jax jungle in solo queue, and so I guess that's what it was for. Lucian and Draven to pinch the ADC champion pool for Cloud9. Very interesting about the Lucian, not so much the Draven. And the reason that I say that is because when you have the Xin Zhao, the Braum, and the Lissandra, even though their jungler isn't locked in, there's basically no way to account for the jungler. Or, I mean, even though the jungler is locked in, you don't account for the jungler and what it means for the mid and bottom lane matchups. There's a very mid-rangey team composition that's already being drafted by Cloud9. So taking away acceleration-based ADCs that are very powerful at 1 and 2 item spikes, or like being bullies and getting ahead, it's really important. Cloud9 instantly lock in the Tristana, reserving the counter pick for Licorice up in the top lane. Fnatic ended up locking in the Sivir, so they have the late game scaling. So let's talk about all the matchups here. So it should be noted that top lane Victor actually does have some counter picks. Echo is considered to be one of them. However, I'm going to talk about how color ties into this. So for Echo and Victor, normally you have it in mid lane. The lane is very short. Echo has a lot of freedom. The lane is also considered very wide. And Victor doesn't have the same luxury in mid lane that he gets in top lane. The other thing here is that it's blue side Victor, which means that for Xin Zhao to be able to commit to ganks, Xin has to invade the blue side jungle of Fnatic and ultimately go into Brox's blue side jungle. Victor is a very awkward champion to die when everything is so condensed when trying to get underneath this turret. This is also easily able to be held and frozen for any top laners. This is also why I thought that Soaz would play on blue side, because it gives, I think, Fnatic options to be more versatile with some of their picks. And I also called for like Soaz to probably be put in game number 3. Ultimately, he wasn't. But anyways, blue side Victor, due to the way that the lane plays out, and again, the fact that the enemy jungler has to go so out of his way to make ganks work, it ends up nullifying a lot of the advantages that Echo would normally find himself having in mid lane. Now, if you put Victor on red and you put Echo on blue, this is a little bit different. Because the jungler has more wiggle room, he's able to be more creative with his paths up into top lane, you have a lot more area to work with, and it's not as dangerous to invade the red side jungle of the opponent because the other types of options that can be granted to you while pressuring mid lane simultaneously, and just again the amount of wiggle room that you have to work with. So this is how the different color schemes can end up playing into the matchup. So blue side Victor will nullify red side Echo. However, if the colors were to be flipped, if it was going to be red side Victor versus blue side Echo, you would see Victor have a little bit more difficulty in the lane, even if it's this identical matchup of Fnatic Cloud9. Victor would struggle more on red than he would struggle on blue. So that's it about the Echo thing. So you have Lee Sin, who obviously wants to be aggressive. He wants to create pressure for both mid and top. So what we're expecting to have Lee Sin do is we expect him to play on the left-hand side of the map. We expect him to give Caps a lot of pressure, whether it be through actual ganks or through pranks, in order to get LeBlanc ahead so that LeBlanc can be opened up and then granted the ability to roam. Because Victor can be sustaining and defensive on top side, what I would expect out of Broxah would be pranks on top lane, because then it can end up ruining Echo's entire lane, and it can be very difficult for Svenskeren to actually salvage that. So Brox's main focus early on should be primarily around Caps, and then following it up around Bwipo with Pranks, which stands for pressure ganks. Ganks meant to alleviate pressure or skew the lane state to then be favorable for his laner. On the flip side, you have Jensen on what's going to be the Lissandra in mid lane that needs to stabilize. You have the Echo that is traditionally thought of as the counterpick to Victor up in top lane. The problem is that when you know that Broxah wants to be playing mid and top centric, you on the Xin Zhao do not have the same luxury to just be power scaling and then attempting to do match and counter ganks, especially because it is counterintuitive to the way that you're drafting as Cloud9. You started off the draft with a very mid-rangey type of team composition. You then turned it into something that would have options to go into 1-3-1 and have scaling inside of an 80 carry. This is the exact type of draft things that Cloud9 was doing the entire tournament. But oftentimes opponents would end up hanging themselves inside of the draft, and so draft errors or flaws within the team composition don't end up getting exposed as hard as they do as perhaps in this game. So interestingly here, a better jungler pick for Cloud9 would, interestingly enough, probably be something like Graves. And the reason that I say that is because Graves would actually have luxury to play against the exact type of playstyle that Lee Sin would want to be dishing out this game. If the argument then comes in that you want to get Sneaky and Zeyzal ahead or something like that, it's counterintuitive to the fact that you need your top laner to get some sort of an edge against the Victor, and you also need to make sure that the LeBlanc stays contained. So again, bottom lane is not a very big focus for either team, which means that Reckless is going to get a full free scaling straight into the mid game, and he's not probably going to be faced with any pressure. It's also blue side Sivir, so if the Tristana actually goes under a lot of pressure and Svenskeren is drawn towards the mid and top hand half of the map, then Reckless can just get a lot of advantages that way. He can scale naturally, so then it ends up becoming an isolated 2v2 down in bottom lane, and interestingly enough, this should end up being an island, I think, in most cases, because of the way the matchups are set up. So now we can get into the game. The reason that I spent so much time talking about this draft is because we see Victor, and it caused a lot of conversation. There was a lot of people that are heralding, Echo is this counter pick against Victor. It's going to be fine. Licorice should have done more with the pick. He got a lot of criticism for that. And I wanted to point out that Victor, in fact, does not suffer the same kind of consequences as top blue side Victor as he would in either mid lane or if he was red side Victor top lane in the same exact matchup. So, with that being said, we're going right into the game. Just waiting for it to start. So I again felt obligated to talk about a lot about the team compositions and what everyone's goals should be, basically approaching the early and mid stages of the game, and then how they want to transition out. If Cloud9 get put behind early, there is no salvaging this with a 1-3-1 type of team composition. Their champions have a reliance on getting into the later stages of the game. The issue here, though, is that due to the way that these champions are, you'll notice that they don't really have any ability to itemize magic resistance, which means that Caps and Whippo are going to be able to deal enormous amounts of damage, even in the later stages of the game, when normally these champions would begin tapering off. So because of this, even though they're mid-rangey and they have some champions that are designed to set up well in the later stages against Fnatic's team composition, they're not going to be finding themselves with those kind of luxuries. So we have a 5-point opening from both teams. Again, it's on Lee Sin to be aggressive early. If he can get any of his laners a kill or an advantage, he would just want to transition that into monkeying on to the opposing jungler and preventing him from helping out the lanes, because it's very difficult for any of the laners to come back once they fall behind in any of these lane setups. Svenskeren ends up getting the red, and Lee Sin moves over to the blue, and we can see the wards that have been placed down. And you can just see where the top lane state is. It's very difficult for Echo to actually crack this, and now with both junglers being on the left-hand side of the map, you can see that they're just basically playing tag with each other. Svenskeren is going to be able to come in over here, perhaps get the Scuttle Crab. And when you look at this right now, look at what Echo just did. He threw out this thing, AoEing this entire wave. Normally, the proximity of the lane, if it was allowed to go even, would eventually slow push back into Licorice. And this could have been good had Svenskeren actually just eaten the Scuttle Crab, maybe counter-jungled the Gromp or something, fell back into his red side jungle, and then in about 2 waves or so, he would be able to actually pressure gank Bwipo, and that would be maybe one way that he could try to skew the lane state into Licorice's favor. But because of the way that Licorice is playing the lane up until this point, and relative to how Sven is choosing to path, this ends up not becoming something that is able to happen. Broxa coming into mid lane, Chain ends up hitting. And you can see here that Jensen clearly not expecting to get hit but like that by Broxa. He only had 2 camps complete. Now this is really problematic. Jensen able to teleport back into the lane. It should be noted that Caps has cleanse, not teleport. And so Jensen is retaining a CS advantage, so he's not going to fall super far behind. But LeBlanc already starting off with that pressure. This was a really good setup by Caps. He was playing a very good pocket and able to set up that gank and coordinate it with Broxa. Bwipo doing a fantastic job right now. He's able to trade really well against Licorice. And what they can know here is, again, it is impossible for Svenskeren to actually coordinate anything against this top lane. The fact that Bwipo is able to permanently hold this lane here and Licorice just keeps doing the definition of insanity and enabling Bwipo to hold it here is causing this lane to be so much more painful than it normally should be. And so this is actually why blue side Victor is such a fucking pain in the ass. For some people that don't understand why it's a good trade, Bwipo still has teleport. And Echo just came off of his teleport and he's already having to dip into his potions. So Victor will come back into the lane with superior recall, superior combat stats, and force Echo out at a much more important point in the game. Here down in bottom lane, Reckless just getting some CS advantages. They're trying to set up another kill onto Jensen. End up hitting that Q. Take it, and they poke. That's another pressure gank coming in from Broxa. Jensen does have level 6. Caps does now as well. But you can just see that Svenskeren, he's not able to really do anything with these lanes. It becomes so increasingly more difficult. He's coming up here into top. He wants to make this happen. And this is honestly a pretty good timing for him to be top right now, because you see the amount of minions that are on for Bwipo, and then you also see where they are in the halfway point. So imagine it basically like a fucking football field. All right. So wherever the minions are relative to, or what side of the lane they're on, if the state of the lane is even, which it's not, Bwipo has better minions, then it will gradually slow push into the opponent. This is a very easy way of looking at the lane and knowing what's going to happen. It's going to take another wave before this crashes into Licorice's turret. So what Svenskeren's trying to do is, this is actually a breaking point in the lane, because there's so many more minions for Bwipo. If he can actually pressure gank him or kill him outright, the lane ends up pushing into Licorice, and then Licorice can actually end up getting a freeze right around here, and Bwipo has to be fearful for his life until his jungler is able to come up and alleviate pressure or get some sort of intel on Svenskeren so that Bwipo is not susceptible to another gank and die. So that's what's going on right now. Someone in Twitch chat telling me they have an equal amount of minions. No, they do not. The damage on Licorice's minions are worse, and also the halfway point is not working in favor of Bwipo. Some people are asking me to slow down. Gravity Field, I actually thought Bwipo was going to die when I watched this live. I honestly don't know what Svenskeren's doing when he doesn't have his flash available. You have to already know that you're going to die. Now, at this point, you know that LeBlanc and Lee Sin are coming. They see this on the ward. There is no turning back at this point for Svenskeren when he doesn't have his flash, but you have to ask, why do you commit as heavy as you do? Because you can see that he's already aware about LeBlanc and Lee Sin. So when you go on to Victor like this, at this point, you turn around. And at this point, maybe with Licorice, you can try to do something, but realistically not. Svenskaren's commitment, despite knowing that reinforcements were on the way for Fnatic, is really, really surprising. Bwipo ends up getting a kill. Caps comes in here with Broxa. They end up picking up another kill. And now Jensen, he has a CS advantage. And it should be noted that he's doing well in the CS department. Should also be noted that he has teleport. So right now top lane is basically an abomination because you can see that these minions are still in front of the turret and they're taking damage. So this wave is going to build up with the next wave that will leave the Nexus and it'll crash right back into Bwipo. And then because of these incoming minions, it'll take Echo too long to actually crash it into Bwipo's turret, which means that Bwipo is going to get the guaranteed freeze again. So Bwipo is decimating Licorice up in top lane. They pick up another kill onto Jensen, and this is really, really bad. Jensen has good CS, but it's not really mattering because the pressure now that's going to come out from mid lane is going to be too much. And this is why the Xin Zhao pick, when you had these lane setups, doesn't end up being that well. And I had to ask myself if, I actually don't know, but I haven't asked Bwipo. Well, from his post-game interview, it sounded like he knew that Victor can fare well into this matchup. I don't know if he, relates it just to the color or whatnot. But when you anticipate that Fnatic might pick Victor and you have Echo set up as the counter pick, I don't know why the jungler is going to be Xin Zhao when you also are wanting to pick Lissandra. So right here you can see that Broxa is doing exactly what he needs to do. He doesn't need to keep farming. He doesn't need to get his camps. All that he needs to do is make sure that Sven can't do anything, and his laners individually will just completely decimate and take over the game. There's absolutely no obligation to do anything. He can farm after getting vision. This is basically like, I don't know, scrying before you draw in Magic. Yeah, Broxa takes his camps after he gets the farm. And then Licorice right here, this was kind of bizarre. Just rewind. So you saw LeBlanc push in mid, and then you saw her disappear. You didn't get confirmation from her, although there was a ping that seemingly went down onto her. But then Licorice moves up, but not only does he move up at a wide angle, which is really, really bizarre. Ends up getting kicked right there, and then obviously Caps is there as well. They end up handing over the blue. This was really, really, really lucky for Cloud9. That could have been so much worse. They end up managing to get out right there. And right now what you're seeing is that Sven he's trying to farm out his jungle, and he's trying to be places, but it's just, again, I keep driving this point home. It's really the lane setups and how the matchups are going to play out. Hylissang and Broxa now just securing vision around the map. And Bwipo is just having the time of his life up in top lane. And now, if Bwipo doesn't hit any of these minions, Echo has teleport, and had he not touched any of them and they just stay right here, the reinforcing minion wave from this lane will arrive to reinforce this lane before Bwipo's can reinforce this minion wave. And what ends up happening is that it slow pushes into Bwipo, which is ideally what he wants, and then Licorice has to commit using teleport. If he can kill Licorice here, then there exists a map rotation that then becomes available, because you know that you're going to have the teleport advantage over Echo. It's all really, really, really good right now. Lee Sin's in close proximity to top lane. They end up seeing Svenskeren. And okay, well. The other thing is that you'll notice that Licorice ended up going Sork Pen Boots, and I don't think that that's the best way to itemize given what has been happening. And then it further plays into the thing that I talked about earlier in regards to the fact that Victor and LeBlanc can both have AP. And then right here is Azel, not really doing too much. Cap's going over 2 walls. And it's just so difficult for Cloud9 to juggle any of this. The Lee Sin just has so much, like, Lee Sin's not taking part in this play that's happening down in bottom, but this is a byproduct of all of the pressure that was exerted so early on by the Lee Sin. You can see Cloud9 here trying to get something done. It just doesn't matter. Cap's moving down. Licorice does not have teleport. Bwipo did. That's double kill. And then at this point, I mean, this is really stupid. Using the Rift Herald to get the turret here is dumb. And the reason that it's dumb is because all of your turrets are super healthy. You just look at, like, even bottom lane turret is still relatively healthy. You're gonna be able to hold that just by putting any of your carries down there except for LeBlanc. There's no reason to summon the Rift Herald and get the bottom tier 1 turret. It is so much more valuable to utilize that Rift Herald mid lane after getting Mountain Drake. It was not about to run out. So that Rift Herald was only used to get the bottom tier 1 turret, which is really foolish. Fnatic now rotating up into top lane, even though there's still a Mountain Drake on the map, and you see that, well, you know that Cloud9 is going to rotate their bottom lane back down into bottom, and the reason that they're going to do that is because there's no neutral objective on the top left-hand side of the map. So there's no reason not to just send Bwipo up into top. Or, if you want one of your wave clear AoE champions in close proximity to your bottom lane, you can have Bwipo be mid, and then you can have Caps go up to top, eat 2 waves, push it back slowly into Cloud9, and then rotate back into mid lane, especially because LeBlanc is more mobile than Victor. So I think that this follow-up rotation by Fnatic is poor because you ideally just want to get the Mountain Drake, but I think that maybe what they have in mind is just accelerating really far ahead. And now you see Cloud9 doing what they've been doing from group stages forward. They're looking to bring the Nayram to top lane. And this is primarily just because they're in desperation mode. They can't actually win a game by trying to stabilize lane states because eventually Sivir is just going to keep wave clearing them and poking them to death underneath their turrets. Victor is going to accelerate so far ahead of the Echo, and LeBlanc just has so much freedom at this stage of the game. So what Cloud9's doing is correct, but the game state is just so bad right now. It is so hard for them to recover from this state. So unless Fnatic ends up going full Afrika, the game is basically over. I mean, it's almost a 7,000 gold lead at 16 minutes. Reckless letting all of the minions die. And if you're Cloud9, you have to concede the top tier 1. Mid tier 1 is the most important, but you're going to have to concede that as well. And the best thing that you can hope for is you try to turtle up, you hope that Fnatic take a very delayed Mountain Drake, and then from that point, you have to out-teamfight Fnatic, which is going to be very difficult because Fnatic has superior poke and push via the Death Ray on Victor and the poke that Sivir is able to offer from Reckless. And then because LeBlanc is also just so ginormously fed, her ability to poke over walls and add damage is just so good. It looks like Jensen steps way too far forward. He has some sort of a desire to defend a turret that has no business being defended because it ends up meaning that Cloud9 has to extend even further on the map in order to get resources. By letting the turret die, it's actually more beneficial for Cloud9. They want the turret dead so that their champions don't have to walk as far up, but also so that they have more time to slowly eat minions before sending them back into Fnatic. And now Fnatic are just telling them that we're going to take this tower, and then we're going to take this one. Caps is up in top lane. I actually couldn't see the size of the wave up in top. That is a permafreeze. So what Fnatic should do here is after raising bottom tier 2 turret, they go down, they eat the Mountain Drake, and after they do that, Cap should permafreeze top lane. They eat the Mountain Drake, Lee Sin eats his Wraiths, Sivir recalls, everyone else recalls. Victor proceeds down into bottom lane. Sivir proceeds to... So this is the rotation. You come here, you eat this, Lee Sin comes here, eats this, recalls, Sivir goes like this, eats red buff, Victor recalls, goes like this, Caps is permafreezing up in top lane. Once the laners get back into formation in mid and bot and they line up together, then you have Sivir come down into here, Caps breaks the freeze up in top lane, and then Caps conjoins with the rest of his team in mid, assuming that he doesn't need to recall for an item, although I don't know what his exact gold is right now. And then what you end up doing is you have a 0-4-1 with a slow push moving up in top lane. This is going to cause a response from Cloud9 that is ultimately going to crash into the turret. And then you can conjoin with Victor down in bottom lane for a 0-0-5. If you end up doing a 0-0-5 at this point, we're looking at like 2.5, 3 minutes into the future. If you end up winning a team fight down in bottom, what'll end up happening next is that mid lane and top lane will ultimately push back into you, and this is around the time that you're looking to win some sort of a fight and potentially capture Baron because you have a Mountain Drake. So these should be the rotations for Fnatic, but they're not going to do them. But unfortunately, I did not account for emotions when suggesting this macro play. So, in a perfect world, they would probably do this, but this is not a perfect world, so... Looks like Caps would have actually needed a recall. Well... Does he really need the Forbidden Eye? Well, I guess he got a Blasting Wand as well. What this would end up meaning is that it would be a 0-3-1 into a 0-0-5, and then the rotations would play out the same way between mid and top lane. And you would have similar rotations. It would just be slightly delayed because what would end up happening is you would have a 0-3-1. And then as the 3 go to join with Victor, Caps would meet the wave in mid and then conjoin with his team, and then he would probably play somewhere around here for pressure against Cloud9. No, of course people rotate to mid to defend. That's why then the Fnatic members rotate to bottom to join with Victor. Okay. So right here, Cloud9 going for the Nayram. They're asking Fnatic, do you believe like Afrika did? They have absolutely no business being this far forward on the map. It's 20 minutes. Baron just fucking spawned. They have a very good top lane relative to the proximity to Baron. They have a decent bottom lane that Fnatic was not making use of. Everything was actually fine, and they had no business fighting over luxury vision that just simply made them comfortable. Fnatic telling them, though, that this is not Afrika, and this is not gen garbage, and so Fnatic's telling them to straighten up, and this is game number 1. Fnatic being really disrespectful, refusing to recall. If you end up recalling here, you have really, really good lane setups. Broxah should also just die. So right here, Broxah's flash is more valuable than his Baron buff because you have Baron on important members. If you do just end up getting hit here with Lissandra still being dead and then you having Sivir and friends in mid lane, this would have been completely fine. You just end up delaying even more. Broxah dies. It's okay. He retains his flash. He has no business. Like, what is the death timer right now? The death timer is what, 30 something seconds? Oh no, it's 40? Is it 40? Oh wow, it's even longer than 40. Coach, by the way. 45? 45 seconds? Caps dies, 45 seconds. So during the 45 seconds, it's going to take... so coming off the fountain and being able to push a wave into mid-turret is almost the same amount of time that it takes Broxah to get back on the map. And this is speaking if Cloud9 have a wave to work with and they can immediately push back Fnatic. There's absolutely no reason for Broxah to have flashed. It's a really, really poor thing. It doesn't matter about the shutdown gold. If you need to fucking complain about 700 goddamn gold when you were 12,000 ahead, I think that you have bigger problems on your hand. Your name's probably Team Liquid. Just looking at the fight again. Cloud9 had no business fighting over or contesting this sort of luxury vision. Flash is just so much more valuable. The gold does not mean as much at this stage. Fnatic now raising top lane. They have Victor in mid lane. This is very nice execution. And after the siege would end up concluding, bottom lane would end up being perfect for them. They also have the teleport on Victor, so they can make use of it right away. So they're raising mid-tier 1. You can see the pings going down in mid lane, and you see Caps' rotation, so they're able to get the Baron enhanced minions yet again. And now they raise mid-tier 3, or I'm sorry, top tier 3, mid-tier 3. They get both inhibitors, and they are backing off, and this is really good. This sets up beautifully for a perfect recall into transitioning into bottom, and then the wave is actually pulling up. Okay, so at this point, they're grouping down into bottom. It's just way too much damage. I mean, they're essentially just A-moving through the opposition. And it's very difficult to talk about what does Cloud9 do in this situation, because realistically, I mean, they should have surrendered. So, that is all for game number 1. So let's talk about what the main issues were. One of the main issues here is that there's problems within the team composition. They're all over the place with their top mid picks relative to the jungler and then relative to the ADC. They have an ADC that is not going to be able to do what he wants to do, and then they have a jungler that normally would want to be playing more aggressively but doesn't have the ability to play aggressively due to the lane setups. You have a jungler that does not benefit from power farming the same way that some other junglers in the game currently could. And then you have a red side Echo, thought of as a traditional counter to Victor, but the counter being nullified due to, again, the color matchup, blue Victor versus red Echo. And then what ends up happening is Caps ends up getting ahead. Broxah is able to basically have a leash on Svenskeren. He's able to circumvent eating camps. And just basically guaranteeing that his laners are allowed to do what he does, and then the leads end up transitioning for Fnatic. The atomization is also something that Cloud9 would find themselves having a lot of difficulty with the mid-game into late-game transitions, just due to the way that the damage is actually spread out on Fnatic. They have 2 really strong sources of physical matched with 2 sources of AP, and there's essentially 4 squishies on the side of Cloud9. Although I guess you could make the argument that Xin Zhao is going to be an off-tank. So with that being said, Cloud9 basically had a really rough time. They would have needed to get edges early on to the point where the laners could be self-sufficient on their own, and then Xin Zhao could basically play a river control style and deny Broxah from ever being able to come back into the game. And then if they could glide into the mid-game on even footing and set up proper flanks and whatnot, and accelerate off of that and get sneaky ahead, then everything would be fine.